America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. For generations, college has been sold as the gateway to the American dream, but for too many families today, it's becoming a financial trap. Joining us again today to discuss this and more is Campus Reform's Emily Sturge. Emily, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I saw your op-ed in the Washington Times. It's called "The New American Dream Starts with a College Search." Tell us about the op-ed and what prompted you to write it.
Well, it's the time of the year where potential college students, future college students are sending in their applications, they're taking tours on campus, and in the springtime, they will have some pretty big decisions to make. And with that in mind, I wrote my op-ed sort of as a guideline for any young person who's making a pretty big decision on which college to go to. And I wanted to remind young people that their American dream actually starts all the way back with their college search. Tuition is one of the biggest expenses that young people face, and the college that they choose is going to determine the amount of debt that they carry into their adult life, as well as the skills that they take into their adult life. So my advice for young people when they're embarking on their college search is to look for two things. I say academics and affordability should be the two main things that you're looking for in schools. That's what I was looking for. And I can talk about my own story. I mean, I prioritize those two things, and now I would say that they are both paying off.
Yeah, you went to in-state university, so you benefited from in-state tuition. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what made you choose the school you chose, and some of those factors that went into that decision.
Absolutely. So like I said, academics and affordability, that's the winning formula for deciding on a school that's going to set yourself up for success. And when I was an 18-year-old in high school, I tinkered with the idea of taking out student loans one day. I received a long list of out-of-state acceptances, but ultimately I turned all of them down because I knew it was not logical to take out student loans. I knew that I wasn't setting myself up for success. So I decided to attend the University of Florida. I benefited from in-state tuition, but more than that, I also earned a full scholarship. I worked through college. I really tried to make choices to set myself up for success. And I think that my story, it's proof that if you make some good decisions early on, it will benefit you in the long run. And so I'm really optimistic in my generation. I am so optimistic in Gen Zers. And by sharing my story, I hope that at least one young person can say, wow, I can do that too, because I have full faith that more members of my generation and generations to come can make these really smart decisions early on and set themselves up for success in the American dream. So that way, when they graduate and go into adult life, they don't carry the burden of student loans and that massive tuition bill. And instead, they can invest their money into buying their first home and starting a family, investing in the stock market, much more responsible decisions than wasting six figures on tuition.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so hard to grasp at 18 what it means to have $25,000 or $50,000 in debt and how long that can take to pay off. And it's really like an anchor around your neck. It seems like kids nowadays, millennials, Gen Z, they seem more willing, almost like that is the normal course, is you graduate from high school and you get a student loan and you go to college, and that is just part of the process. how do you think we change that mentality of just accepting that that's the way to do it?
Well, we're living in a time where there are a lot of choices. We have seen a blue collar boom among young people. We've seen many young people choosing to go into the trades with young men. We've seen young men going into the blue collar industry, but young women, I've seen a lot of young women that personally I graduated with. They've become realtors or hairstylists. They've chosen other pathways. But for those who choose to still go to college, I think it's important that we note that a degree is no longer a golden ticket to a career. There was a March report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We reported it at Campus Reform, and it revealed that recent college graduates, the employment numbers for those recent college graduates was about the same as non-degree holders. And that data was proof that having a degree wasn't necessarily a golden ticket straight into a career. That's something that young people should keep in mind as they're making their college decisions. And maybe that should be inspiration for looking into programs that are more likely to guarantee a higher return on investment. Choosing a degree that's going to equal marketable skills rather than a degree that is merely ideology.
That's what I was going to follow up with is it really depends on the degree program you choose. And we've seen a lot of programs over the last few decades created that are not preparing students for to have marketable skills. I always pick on this one, but it's the one that comes to mind is, the gender studies and degree programs like that. I mean, there are not. I can't imagine that there is corporations full of people studying gender studies. There's going to be very limited jobs in that area. Hopefully they will go away if I had my druthers. But, if you pick the right program, we saw a college bailout under the Biden administration. And we saw some movement from the federal government. The Republican senators put forth legislation to try to hold colleges accountable, but also have students have a stake in things in terms of colleges having to be measured in terms of the jobs that their degree programs would get. And unfortunately, that legislation didn't go anywhere. How do you think the federal government could really impact some of these college degree programs that, let's just face it, they are worthless?
You're absolutely right. And we've done a wonderful analysis at Campus Reform of talking about the return on investment of certain degrees. And it's true that certain social science degrees that focus on ideology rather than marketable skills that students can take to the workforce, of course, those degrees are going to have a lower return on investment because they lead to lower wages. Meanwhile, degrees in engineering or finance or business, our analysis actually shows that those degrees lead to higher wages and, of course, a higher return on investment. Something that I'd really like to see colleges come out with on their university websites. It would be a great resource for students, for colleges to show, first off, the entire cost of a degree, because I wouldn't say colleges are entirely transparent on that process. There's lots of hidden fees. So first off, they need to show the entire cost of the degree, but then also provide a resource to compare to likely salaries. So students can see, maybe it's not the best idea if my likely salary is only $50,000 a year. Maybe it's not the best idea to spend 6 figures on a degree. Back to some of those hidden costs, colleges could definitely be more transparent in showing some of those hidden fees. For example, student activities fees or student health insurance fees. At the University of Florida, where I attended, if a student goes through 4 years of school there, they're by the time of graduation paying almost $2,000 in student activities fees that go to things like events on campus. I wasn't a student that necessarily took advantage of all of those events, so I didn't necessarily benefit from those fees. And colleges would certainly serve students better if they didn't charge students nearly as much in those hidden fees and allowed students to keep that money in their wallets, invest it in themselves, invest it in the stock market, or use those dollars to pay their rent that month.
Well, you mentioned that you worked through college as well. So yeah, a student that has to, work part-time or even sometimes full-time is not going to be able to benefit from those types of activities. Some of the Ivy League schools in their tuition has reached as much as $70,000 a year. When you get when you finish your degree program. My daughter also went to the University of Florida. We call her a double gator because she also went to the nursing school, and she was accepted at a private nursing school as well as UF nursing school. Same program. At the end of but the program that accepted her from out of state was going to be about 8 times more. And nobody could justify it because at the end, no matter what school you go to, they all take the same test. They all have to pass the same exact test to become a nurse. And so she was able to go through that program, graduate, do very well, and get a great job, and still she doesn't have any debt. And I told her all the way through that the greatest gift that I could give her was to encourage her not to go out of state and pay out of state tuition, and not to take student loans. And she worked through college as well. She was actually in a sorority, and she was probably one of the few girls that would leave to go to her job at Chick-fil-A in her Chick-fil-A uniform, working part-time. And, she loved it. She loved the experience. And she finally told me afterwards, because I'm sure she wanted to go out of state. She told me afterwards, when she went to buy her first house with her now husband, that when the mortgage person said, "What are your debts? Do you have any student loans? Do you have any car payments?" She was able to say, "I don't have any student loans." And he said, "Wow, I can't tell you how many people have student loans. More often than not, they've got student loans to deal with in trying to buy a house."
Congratulations to your daughter. I have chills because that is exactly what I'm talking about in my latest opinion piece, is young people making these smart decisions early on. They're setting themselves up for the American dream of settling down and starting a family, setting themselves up for a successful career without the chains of debt. Your daughter has an incredible story, and my parents told me the same exact thing. My parents told me that the greatest gift they could give me was to help set me up to have $0 in debt. And as I mentioned, I earned scholarships. I also worked through college, as your daughter did. And we know, both her and I know, that those decisions that you make at 18, 19, 20 years old can set yourselves up for success. You mentioned in there just how high the cost of an Ivy League degree has grown today. And as we're talking about some of those social science programs that focus more on ideology instead of marketable skills, I think back to some examples that I've actually reported at Campus Reform. I went and looked at university websites of some of the most bizarre degrees that universities are offering this fall, and then I went and looked at the price tag. And Harvard University, you bet, they are still offering the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies degree this fall, which comes at a price tag of over $80,000 a year. $80,000 a year. That is an astronomical price tag, but I feel bad for students who are, they're going through that program thinking that they have a career at the end of that program, but unfortunately, degrees like that are just not resulting in jobs for students because they're not graduating with skills. And the data backs it up. We've reported at Campus Reform, it's only 12% of college graduates who are securing jobs before graduation. That's because so many students are graduating without marketable skills. This is a problem that we need to reform. First off, our universities themselves. We need to bring skills and standards and academic rigor back to the classroom, and that's exactly why we're talking about this today.
I like how you reference it, ideology, that these are programs that they're going into for ideology, not necessarily for a job. A lot of younger people, are more liberal, and ideology plays a big role in what they study. How do how do we reach those folks and kind of tell their older self why picking that degree based on ideology is not going to help them?
Absolutely. I mean, the first step, I think, is for us at Campus Reform, we are trying to provide resources for students to look to, especially those students who are picking a degree, picking a college. That's why we have our analysis on our website about the different return on investments of the different degrees. But more than that, when students are on campus, no matter their political ideology, I'd like to see more communication in the classroom, communication inspired by professors, crossing partisan lines. Of course, I'd like to see more campus events. I'd like to see more conservative speaker events, because you're absolutely right. The majority of students on most campuses today are liberal students. And the greatest threat to society is to have people locked in a box where they aren't exposed to other opinions. That's why it's so important to have so many of these conservative speaker events on campus, because for some students, that might be the only time they're exposed to differing viewpoints. It's also very important to inspire these conversations in the classroom. A lot of times that goes back to the university professor themselves. Some of the greatest university professors I had when I was a student would allow spaces in class to have these conversations. And it's so important. I was very lucky. I went to a Southern public university. A lot of those universities tend to have more of a balance, both among students and among faculty when it comes to viewpoint diversity. And when I think about Ivy League schools or elite schools up in the North, there's a lot less of that. There's a lot less of that, the viewpoint diversity among both faculty and students. And that's why I think it's so important to have those conservative speaker events, especially on those northern campuses.
Oh, yes, I agree. I didn't realize that you had found that some of the southern schools have a better mix in terms of ideology. So that's promising to hear. If you could give parents just 3 questions to ask before signing that tuition check, what would they be?
Lots of lessons here. First off, choose a school based on academics and affordability. That's the winning formula. Next up, choose a degree program that's going to give your child a great return on investment. Next, I would consider if graduate school will be necessary. And then, of course, looking at the total debt load of, first off, your undergraduate degree, then your graduate degree. Also keep in mind, housing is a massive expense. And when you look at all of those factors, maybe start to compare to salaries of the career that you and your child thinks that they would like to go into one day. I think all of these factors are very important in the college search process, and I point to all of them in my recent opinion piece.
Do you think it would help if the loan programs went back to the banks and there was a more rigorous process in terms of approving the loans for these 18-year-olds based on outcomes in terms of the salary, the average salary for a degree program? Because, I mean, let's face it, you can have degree programs on these colleges, but it doesn't mean that banks would want to fund those degree programs.
Absolutely. And I've also seen new businesses sprout up in recent years, privatizing loans and providing different options for students. But at the end of the day, I'm always going to point students in the direction of choosing a college based on lower tuition rates. And Southern public universities have found a way to balance both providing strong academic rigor, but then also providing those lower tuition rates. And I'll point to recent college rankings that the Manhattan Institute City Journal released. The City Journal graded colleges based on factors like free speech and merit, safety on campus, viewpoint diversity of professors and the student body. And when I looked at that list of rankings, it was Southern public universities that dominated all of the factors of academic rigor, merit, free speech on campus. The University of Florida actually ranked number 1, which of course is my alma mater. And then when you look at the top 10, it's Southern schools like Clemson University, Florida State University, the University of Georgia, UNC Chapel Hill. And what's so important about all of these schools, they have much lower tuition rates. so that alleviates much of the tuition problem in the first place before students even have to think about taking out student loans. Some of those schools in the top 10, like Florida State University's tuition is only around $5,000 a year, which is an incredible investment for many Floridian students who benefit from those in-state tuition rates. And then on top of that, many Floridian students also benefit from scholarships. So before the loan conversation even comes into the picture, of course, I'm always going to point to finding a good public college that provides academic rigor. That's always my number one piece of advice.
Well, I think you have great advice, sound advice that I know particularly young people who have followed in your same footsteps. And I think it's so important. We're carrying over $1 trillion in student loans right now as a country as a whole. And that is hurting the American dream in terms of all of the things that you talk about, buying a house, getting married, starting a family, all of those things. It's a big delay. And I just don't think that younger people understand the impact of taking such huge loans out. And there are such great alternatives. Oh, one we didn't even talk about was going to community colleges and how affordable those can be to start out the first few years of college before you transfer to an in-state university.
Absolutely. I had many friends that I graduated high school with who chose to live at home, chose to attend community college. And some people that I've spoken to personally in my own life said that set themselves up for success. Then they were able to move to a 4-year college once they achieved the amount of credits that they needed. And then they graduated with much less in debt that they were then able to. I know somebody that put a down payment on a home with all of the money that they saved. So trade schools, community college, there are so many wonderful alternatives that members of Generation Z are finding. And it's really incredible at this point in time to see there are still many young people going to traditional 4-year college, getting those traditional degrees. But it's incredible to see so many young people embracing these alternative pathways when it doesn't seem like too many years ago. I mean, it was just a known thing. You have to go to get a 4-year degree at a traditional college. Now it seems like there's a lot more freedom, and young people are certainly benefiting from it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing and helping to educate younger people on this issue, because it's so important. Tell everyone where they can find out more about you and campus reform and what you guys are working on.
We are reporting stories every single day at campusreform.org. We are closing out an incredible year of reporting. 2025 was a big year in higher ed because we have a new president in the Oval Office. We've seen lots of changes all the way from women's sports to cleaning up anti-Semitism on campus, reforming diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that had taken root in our college campuses. We've seen a lot of changes in 2025, and we are optimistic that we will continue to see education return to our classrooms in 2026.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts from, and we will be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.